What is going on, everyone? Welcome into our next divisional draft grades video, where we're going to be taking a look back at the draft, talking about who maximized the picks that they had, maybe who stole some really great players, maybe perhaps based on my own evaluations who reached a little bit, or maybe passed on who I think will be better options at the next level. But ultimately just taking a look as well at who these players are, how they fit in with their new teams, and what I think they might be at the next level. I do encourage you to take a look in the description below. I have a new grading criteria for this, really trying to amp up the consistency and transparency with how I come up with these grades. While you're down there, if you could throw a like on the video, I really appreciate it. It takes just a second. It's a meaningful way to support my channel. Also, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of these draft grades videos. And next up, we have my deep dive series coming in just a few weeks. Going to work throughout the entire summer, previewing every NFL team in depth. I think it's the best thing I have to offer on this channel. You're not going to want to miss it, so make sure you're subscribed, and let's get into it. So let's kick the NFC South off with the Arizona Cardinals, who I honestly think you can make a case had the best draft this entire weekend. Monty Ossenfort, the new general manager, came in and absolutely freaking smashed it, man. And before we even talk about the players they took, which I think they got really good players at positions of value, they did two things with this draft that I'm so encouraged by if I were a Cardinals fan and just looking outward in at this organization. Number one, you look at the first two picks they made, offensive line, defensive line. Really, in the whole Cliff Kingsbury regime, the number one overarching criticism of this Cardinals team is they've been soft and squishy and scared. And they now bring in a defensive-minded coach. Granted, I didn't think was the best hire in the world, but you know what? I'm willing to open my mind a little bit more after seeing their process here being, executed so great. But more specifically, the general manager, Monty Ossenfort, who stems from Tennessee via New England, definitely has that hard-nosed, old school mentality when it comes to football, coming from those two regimes. But Cliff Kingsbury and company have been trying to build a Big 12 championship team here in the NFL, and it just hasn't worked. They've been building a track team with receivers and ignoring the offensive line. Not anymore. They're building a football team equipped to handle the, physical aspects of this game. So I love the kind of mentality shift that they've made. And then even more than that, what they got from the Houston Texans was highway robbery. And I didn't fully realize it in real time when I was praising the Texans for going to get Will Anderson and CJ Stroud. But the haul that they got for that pick was insane. It was way more than I thought they would get. They got the 33rd pick in this draft, which they then used to move back up and get the player they wanted anyway. So they had such a good plan here. But they get the Texans' first and third round picks next year. I thought almost for sure this would be the Browns' first round pick, right? Because the Browns are trying to build something where, the Texans, I can't say they aren't trying to build something, and I like a lot of the stuff they've done, but man, this is a team that has been in one of the biggest gutters that we've seen in recent memory for an NFL team. They've been a laughing stock, right? They've seriously been horrible. And you are putting so much pressure now, and we're not analyzing the Texans here, but Stroud and Will Anderson basically have to overhaul that organization overnight, and DeMeco Ryans, and it's possible, but the gambling odds still have the Texans as a likely top 5 pick next year, and I think you think about this rationally, and it's even if they're building some nice things in Houston, there's a pretty good probability that that's still going to happen this upcoming season. And then you factor in, the Cardinals also are in a bit of a rebuild. Kyler Murray's not going to be there week 1 in all likelihood. So, man, you look ahead to next year's draft where you have Caleb Williams is already being touted like the next Patrick Mahomes. And, sometimes everyone always says, we say that every year. Well, not necessarily, not the way we talk about Caleb Williams. Drake May as well, and Marvin Harrison, who, even if those quarterbacks do flop, I think Marvin Harrison is seriously one of the best prospects to come out in a long time, and he hasn't even played his final year yet. So to me, it's you are doubling your chances at getting your shot at one of those three prospects, whether that's drafting Marvin Harrison and getting, a Jamar Chase level impact rookie receiver into the mix for Kyler Murray, whether you're sitting there and you can collect a million assets again. You might be able to get 3 first-round picks for Caleb Williams or Drake May. Or maybe you really don't like how things go this year with Kyler Murray. He's not a fit with the staff. and you want to get some picks for Kyler and draft a new quarterback. I think they have future-proofed this team so well, and their window now is so outstanding, and they have such a great plan. So that's before we even talk about the players that they picked. But just from a process perspective, I think you're so encouraged by the Cardinals. But let's get into the players they took. So getting Paris Johnson at 6, I give it an S+++ based on all of the trade stuff we just talked about. But the player himself is still a phenomenal pick, man. I really think Paris Johnson was an underrated player in this draft. I said in my last predictive mock draft, everyone expects him to go to the Bears at 9. Don't be the least bit surprised if he comes off the board before that, because he really, to me, is very close to what Andrew Thomas was as a college prospect coming out of Georgia, who ended up going with the 4th pick in the draft. 3 years later, he's an all-pro left tackle. I really think that highly of Paris Johnson. He's equally as athletic and dominant in the run game. Similarly to Andrew Thomas as well, he just has a little bit of technical deficiency in his pass protection sets that he needs to work on. His hand placement and his reaction time to step up and cut off inside moves needs to improve. But you can explain some of that stuff because he played his first couple years at guard. He stepped out to left tackle for his junior year and kicked ass and took names. So to me, Paris Johnson has a really good chance of being a Pro Bowl tackle, an all-pro tackle. He's going to improve the run game right away. Over time, I think eventually he'll settle in as their left tackle. They now have 4 tackles on the roster. Some of them are going to end up playing guard, I'm sure. And maybe that is Paris Johnson in year 1 as they kind of work out who's playing where. But I do think long-term, he's going to be a franchise left tackle for Kyler Murray, or maybe even Caleb Williams in the future. So this, to me, honestly, I think when you factor in the trade and what they got and the trade back up as a conglomerate, may have been the best franchise-altering decision/draft pick of the entire weekend. So I really wanted to highlight how great this move was for the Arizona Cardinals. But it does not stop there. They get B.J. Ojulari, 10 picks into the second round. I love it. That's really good value right there. They are now building kind of a collection of pass rushers that will eventually turn into complementary pieces to someone that I think they hope can be, number 2s and number 3s to someone they have down the road figure out, a true alpha there. I love B.J. Ojulari. I just would be very surprised with his physical tools if he ever turned into an alpha, right? A Bosa or a Crosby or, Myles Garrett, or even Danielle Hunter, Zadarius Smith, that kind of stuff. And maybe Zadarius Smith becomes available to them in a trade after this. But you're talking about a guy that has a million different ways to beat you as a pass rusher. He's got better power than you expect. I don't love what he does against the run, but I think this was a really good value. Definitely the best pass rusher available for them at this point in time. So that pick's going to get an A. And then you take Garrett Williams in the 3rd round. Love this as well. Garrett Williams coming off an injury at Syracuse. If he was able to really finish his testing and finish his final season, he might have snuck into the 2nd round. His tape is pretty damn good. And what you love about this is he played the same system at Syracuse that he's going to play for Jonathan Gannon coming in. That Fangio quarters off zone kind of read and react type of coverage, and he's really good at that. He can close downfield really well. He makes quick decisions with his eyes on the quarterback while reading the receiver's route in tandem, and I think he's going to be their best corner in year 1 as a 3rd round pick. And it's not saying a lot. Their cornerback depth chart, their cornerback room is probably the worst position group in all of football before the draft, so whoever they took in the first 3 rounds was going to start. But I don't think they could have found a much better player for that. I think, him and Cam Mitchell were basically neck and neck for me in the 3rd round for that type of player. I like Cam Mitchell slightly better, but I can't really argue with Garrett Williams here either. And then Michael Wilson basically is a 4th round pick here. This guy was a true 2nd round talent to me. He was my number 7 wide receiver in this class. I think he's as long as he can stay healthy, and that's an if, right? So this could be medicals involved, but as long as he can stay healthy, to me, he's a certified number 2 wide receiver. You plug him in as a, kind of flanker, running slants, digs, hitches. His release off the line of scrimmage is some of the best you'll ever see from a college prospect. His route running is sensational. He's a tough guy after the catch. He's a run blocker. He can now come in, and whatever you do with DeAndre Hopkins, he gives you some flexibility. And I look at the long term of this receiving room. I mean, my goodness, you could very well be looking at having Marvin Harrison. I know we're getting way ahead of ourselves, but this team ultimately getting Marvin Harrison is starting to feel pretty damn realistic, right? As long as they like Kyler Murray. But you could very realistically be looking at Marvin Harrison as your number one, Michael Wilson as your perfect like complementary perimeter slash, can come into the slot and separate in the short to intermediate. You got your deep threat in Hollywood Brown, who's under contract for a long time, or at least going to be very soon. Rondale Moore is a gadget player, an improved offensive line. Like, this is a dream situation for Kyler Murray. This is remarkable value for Michael Wilson. Might not never be a superstar, but as a part of a high-end receiver group that could end up looking like that, you can get really excited about how annoying he's going to have to be to cover, because you're going to end up with your number 2, number 3 corners trying to cover a guy that's genuinely going to be, I don't know, top 20 route runner in the NFL by season 2. I do believe that. And he's got high upside too. Like, I've made parallels to who he is as a prospect to what Devontae Adams was as a prospect. That's a ridiculous leap of faith to say he can become that level of player. But you look at the foot speed, the route running, the work ethic, it's not out of the question either. So this pick was insane. And then you get to day 3. I don't think there was anything that really jumps off the page here. You get John Gaines, who's an athletic offensive lineman, a little bit earlier than I liked him, but there's tools there. Maybe can even compete for starting work early on because it is not a great interior group. They take Clayton Tune in the 5th round. I think we'll see how long Case Keenum gets the runway there, but he gives you someone that if Kyler's injury isn't going as well and you end up wanting to just sit him for the rest of the year, maybe you do want to secure that number 1 pick. Clayton Tune can come around, come in and show off his tools, and you never know with these day 3 guys. He's a tradesy guy. He made a lot of plays at Houston, just never really developed in his time there, really. But as a 5th round pick, I'm cool with it. Owen Papo, who people were stunned didn't make my top 10 linebackers video. I had a true day 3 grade on him. He's fast. That's it. He had possibly the worst. No, he did. He definitely had, of the 30 linebackers that I watched, he was the worst one easily. So he can run and cover kicks and show off his 4.4 speed, but he's got to learn how to play the position. But he's in a spot where he can do that. This is where you draft freaky athletes at that position. So I think that's good process there. Kytrell Clark in the 6th round. A lot of people look at his size. He's a slender 5'10" and kind of project him into the slot. And I think he could be a slot corner for them, certainly. But I loved his tape as that, just like we said about Garrett Williams, as that off the ball, quarters heavy, zone corner. And a trend around the league is guys like Darius Williams, DJ Reed. We saw it in Minnesota last year with Duke Shelley, and they're all just like Kytrell Clark, like 6th, 7th, even undrafted types of guys with very similar skill sets. I think as far as the system is concerned, I think he has a really good chance to actually start opposite of Garrett Williams and might have kind of a fun, quick twitch, jumpy, instinctive pair of young corners there that room is so freaking terrible. So I really think they got a good fit there in the 6th round. I'm excited to see if he can win a starting job there. Because he has the tools to be a starter in this system. He really does. So we'll keep an eye on that. And then Dante Stills at the end of the 6th round as a hybrid defensive end, a chess piece for Jonathan Gannon to come in as a rotational lineman, can play a little 3-tech, 4-tech, 5-tech. He defends the run pretty well from the edge. He's going to be undersized if he's asked to do it on the inside. They just need more defensive linemen. I think he can be a part of a rotation as a late 6th round pick. So another good pick there. Ultimately, this has to be an A+. I think this is my favorite draft. There's a couple other insane drafts, but man, good job for the Cardinals. I'm really happy for you Cardinals fans. You have endured some very questionable, shaky decision-making over the last couple of years, and just the logic and value and execution of this draft really couldn't have been any better for the Cardinals in the first year of this new regime. This show is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to play fantasy football. The moment this draft is complete, Best Ball Mania 4 goes live, and it is the biggest fantasy football competition of all time. Not even kidding. It's only $25 to enter for your shot at $15 million in total prizes and a first place prize of $3 million. You won't want to miss out on this action. The best part is, because it's best ball format, all you have to do is draft your teams, which you can do at home on your phone thanks to the amazing Underdog app. In Best Ball Mania, you join the tournament, draft your team as you would in any normal fantasy football league, and your lineup is locked in once the draft is complete. No waivers, no trades. That's right, it is set it and forget it until it's time to collect your cash. Underdog automatically optimizes your lineup weekly to create the highest scoring option. What are you waiting for? Get signed up at UnderdogFantasy.com or via the App Store with promo code TFG, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code TFG for your shot at $15 million inside Best Ball Mania 4. All right, buckle up for the LA Rams because they made 14 picks here. 3 in the day 2 of the draft, none in the first round. So a weird draft to kind of grade here. But, Steve Avila with the 5th pick in the 2nd round, I'm going to be honest, it's a little bit early for me. I think he's going to be a starter. I think he's going to be fine. But first off, I think it was just a little bit early. I didn't love his run blocking. I really didn't. And the Rams are a team that want to go wide zone. And Avila is a good athlete. In fact, he's a better athlete than like Osiris Torrance for this system. So I can understand, even though I had Torrance above Avila, if you needed to take one of those two for a wide zone scheme fit. I do understand Avila because he's more athletic, but I would argue Torrance actually gets out of his stance faster. Avila he tested well and moved well once he got going, but that was where I really was underwhelmed by Avila. I thought he was really slow off the ball. He didn't generate as much push for a bigger guy as I would have expected, but he is a really good pass protector. So if you're looking for someone to keep Matthew Stafford and whoever your incumbent quarterback after that is upright in the receiving game or in the passing game, I get it. But where I'm more critical of this is with like John Michael Schmitz and Joe Tippmann and even like Matthew Bergeron, who the Falcons took a few picks later, kind of had the foresight to move him into guard. I think Matthew Bergeron is going to be a hell of a lot better guard for a wide zone blocking scheme than Steve Avila. It's not the end of the world. I think he's going to be a quality starter for them, or at least a decent starter. Maybe not a quality starter. I was a little bit lower on Avila, so I want that to be reflected in the grade here. I'm not going to slam them for it, but I definitely would have gone in a different direction with this pick. Byron Young in the middle of the 3rd round, there's really nothing wrong with this pick. In fact, I'm giving it an A because the value checks out. It's a position of value and a position of need. It's just like the timeline for him is going to have to be really sped up if you think he could maybe start. And with this group, maybe he could, but he's going to be 25 in his rookie year. And he's still very new to football, but he is an insane athlete. So he's the type of gamble I think you should make here. The run on edge players was pretty insane. So, he was definitely the best option for them at this spot. So if I'm grading their process, I'm going to give it an A. I think it's a pretty high risk pick, but the risk is definitely worth the reward for him. So we'll see what he can do. And then Kobe Turner at the end of the 3rd round. Look, I like Kobe Turner. He's got really good technique. He's incredibly instinctive. Obviously, you're putting him here now with Aaron Donald as a mentor. The end of the 3rd round is rich for me. It just is. I had him as maybe a 5th or a 6th round guy, a non-combine invite, a guy that played, big, Division I football for 1 year and was a rotational player for Wake Forest. Really efficient guy, kind of coming in, playing 30, 35 snaps a game, and kind of using his quickness and his instincts to splash into the backfield, splash as a pass rusher. But it was just really early, man. I'm worried about how his size is going to translate to the next level. How many guys have we said, oh, this is the next Aaron Donald, and it just doesn't even come nearly close to that. I think just because Aaron Donald's here doesn't mean Kobe Turner can be Aaron Donald. I do think he can be a good rotational lineman. I question if he's ever going to be a starter for them, and it was just early. Like, if you're going to go with a undersized interior rusher with upside, I cannot defend taking Kobe Turner over Adetomiwa Adebawore. Like, man, that would have gotten me so much more excited here. So I'm a little bit more critical of that pick as well. I think he'll be a fine player for them because of the success they've found with a guy like Aaron Donald, and he is a system fit because, they do like to put these undersized guys as kind of four eyes where their size isn't as exposed. But yeah, definitely not my favorite pick. And then we've got all these day 3 picks. Stetson Bennett actually at the end of the 4th round, maybe a touch earlier than we expected him to go, but I'm actually cool with it. We saw this run on quarterbacks around this part of the draft, and I mean, man, he's going to be so familiar with this system. It's a lot of the same stuff they did at Georgia. Matthew Stafford is like not throwing right now. We don't know if he's going to get healthy. I can actually see Stetson Bennett being kind of Brock Purdy-esque for this team. Like, I kind of liked Stetson Bennett a hell of a lot more than I thought I would. He's small and, 26 years old, and he played with this incredible opportunity in Georgia, but it's not like he had amazing receivers at Georgia, right? I think he made some really big throws. He had some clutch moments. For a guy that's probably going to play at some point this year, I can really understand this pick, honestly. If nothing else, as like a locker room guy with a lot of swagger and energy and confidence that in the almost inevitable situation where Matthew Stafford can't play, you have a guy that I think this locker room can at least look to and be like, okay, this guy won 2 national championships. He's coming in. He understands the playbook. He's getting through his reads quickly. And I don't know if he's ever going to be a long-term starter. I'd be pretty damn surprised. But I think it's in the realm of possibilities, maybe call it 5%. So I did think that was a good pick. They take Nick Hampton in the 5th round. Fine. Fits their system, as a 3-4 stand-up edge. I think he's going to be a rotational player, a backup, and has some developmental upside, but I'd be pretty surprised if he was ever a starter in the NFL. That's pretty rare territory for the edge position, right? You're looking for rare traits, rare size, all that stuff. But he's got some quickness. He's got some fun ways that he wins as a pass rusher. So he could be in the mix in year 1. Warren McClendon out of Georgia. Interesting player. I think if he wasn't playing at Georgia, we might view him a little bit better. I didn't think his tape was bad. He played at like 290 in his final year at Georgia, and it came off that way. He looked really slender at Georgia. He put on about 10 pounds for his pro day, which I appreciate. The biggest thing with him is, he was a fine college tackle, but they had this, I can't remember his name, but they had this 5-star coming in, and by the end of the year, they were rotating him with McClendon. So McClendon couldn't really get in a rhythm, and anytime you look at a guy that technically gets like benched in a way, it's going to push him down a little bit. But I think, as a guard, he might have some potential. I think he has a little bit of potential at tackle. He's probably just a backup, but he was the very, you reach a point in your evaluations where you go from potential starters to, yeah, this guy's probably a backup. McClendon I struggled with. He was the first guy in my rankings that fell off from that potential starter ranking. And it was because some of that weird profile stuff. So if he's put on 10 pounds and he gets in an opportunity where they believe in him a little bit more, they may have something there. So I do think it was a good pick. But obviously he's going to be up against it a little bit as a late 5th round pick. Davis Allen at the very end of the 5th round. I like this. I had a 4th to a 5th round grade on him. Super sound tight end. He was better than a lot of tight ends that got drafted before him. Like better than tight ends that went the 2nd round of this draft, like Brenton Strange, and I even had him ahead of Luke Schoonmaker. Allen is not a great athlete. He's like a legit 4.8 speed guy, but I loved his run blocking. He was one of the most high effort, high technique run blockers in this class. Converted 90% of his contested catch opportunities. He's got a great wingspan, over 10.5-inch hands. So like he is really good at using that size to box guys out and win those tough balls. I think you get a surefire tight end too, and a guy that could even be a low end starter someday. So that was one of my favorite kind of day 2 picks or day 3 picks for them. But I like Puka as well. I had a 5th to a 6th round grade on him. Unfortunately, just really banged up over the last year and hasn't really been able to show off everything he has to offer. But his best tape is really fun. He's a great route runner. I was watching his tape before the Senior Bowl when, he gets hurt in Mobile. Couldn't really... I think he did ultimately run his 40 and ran it like a 4.6. I think he's a little bit faster than that on tape. So to me, you're getting a guy that had a rough pre-draft process, but really could start for them in year 1 if he can get healthy, because this wide receiver group is underratedly bad. I'm surprised they didn't take more wide receivers on day 3, honestly. Then they take Trey Tomlinson. A lot of people are raving about this pick. I didn't see it. I did have a 6th round to a priority free agent grade. A lot of people in the chat were like, how is Trey Tomlinson falling? I didn't see it as a fall. I really didn't. He's 5'7.5". He's one of the grabbiest corners I've ever watched. He was flagged 14 times. That's over one per game in his final year at TCU. He's undersized, and he knows it. Like, he's grabbing because he has to. How often is he going to get away with that at the NFL level? Is it going to come with these frustrating situations where, he's grabbing all the time. He's a penalty waiting to happen. I do think as a backup, that's fine. Like, he can give you a kind of boom or bust spot start, whether it's on the outside or the inside. He played outside. At TCU, we've talked about Darius Williams being a guy that came from this system and found a way to make it work on the outside, playing off coverage instead of getting up in guys' faces and having to press guys at 5'7". But I saw a backup in his game. I don't think he has the tackling consistency and the size to play in the slot all that well. If he's going to succeed, it's going to be here where they have no corners and a system that fits him. So, honestly, probably the best landing spot for Trey Tomlinson. But long term, I just don't see this potential starter that everybody's talking about. Sure, he might start in year one, but it's going to be very streaky. You're going to get some good games. You're going to get some really bad games in there, and eventually I think they will replace him. But as a 6th-round pick, I think it's a solid pick. Otuan Mathis, developmental, lengthy edge guy at Nebraska that's old and still hasn't figured things out. Zach Evans out of Ole Miss. I was not a Zach Evans guy, but this is like a former number 1 running back in his class, and he did test well. I just don't think he's an instinctive runner, right? He I think banked on his athleticism earlier in his career and then gets to the SEC and lacked the creativity to make guys miss. I don't think that necessarily just shows up once you get to the NFL, but maybe with good coaching, something clicks. If nothing else, he's a decent 3rd running back as a backup. Still a very young guy. They take a punter in the 7th round. Fine with it. Jason Taylor in the middle of the 7th round. Good value. He was, I think, my safety 11. Really rangy cover safety on the back end. And he was a playmaker. I think he broke up 14 passes over his last 2 years, which for a true deep safety is really impressive production. I think that shows off his aggressive nature and putting him into kind of a hybrid system here where they're going to run a lot of quarters and kind of let him pin his ears back and trigger on stuff. You might see a guy that could come in as a starter someday and make some plays. He just has to learn how to defend the run, man. You talk about Big 12 defense earlier with the Cardinals and why it gets such a bad rap. I mean, guys like Jason Taylor are the prime example. Like, there are times where teams are handing the ball off out of shotgun or running screens, or a player even sneaks into the second level and he's just jogging or walking down. Like, he, out of pretty much any player in this class, visibly on tape, didn't give a shit about the run. So they got to find a way to coach that into him. Otherwise, he's going to be a liability in the NFL. But, if you can, he can be a starter in the NFL for sure. And in the 7th round, that's a good pick. And then they take Dejuan Johnson out of Toledo, a productive hybrid kind of edge guy, sort of in line with Kobe Turner, just another dart throw there. I could see in this system with a weak D-line him becoming a part of a rotation, but obviously not likely with the 42nd pick. This was basically Mr. Irrelevant. Maybe it was Mr. Irrelevant. I lose track of who that ultimately was. So overall, this draft is tough to grade because there's 14 picks here, right? And inevitably, a couple of these will just hit because the Rams are a good coaching staff. And, I understand their process with this. But when I look back at the haul, 2 of my 3 kind of reaches and picks that I didn't love were the picks that you had chances to get real impact players. And, I really hope I'm wrong, especially about Steve Avila. And, I like the process on Byron Young, but he was inevitably going to be a really high-risk prospect. So you're kind of playing with fire with that pick there, too. So, I didn't love day 2. And then you get to day 3, and, every pick was kind of, hitting a single. There were real potential impact starters and huge steals that were available in this draft, right? Like Keila Ringo started to slip. I think that would have been a great gamble instead of Kobe Turner. You look at Adebawore and even down the board a little bit like Corey Trice. They didn't take any linebackers in the draft. Where's the Servacia Dennis, a Zach Kuntz pick, an offensive line pick that I'm really excited about falling where he did. Some of these wide receivers that were available late into day 2. It's man, I can't pick any individual pick and be I would change that one. But when I look at the overall haul with all these picks, give me 1 or 2 of those guys that, we're falling. And Man, it's just so hard because I know like a couple of these guys are going to be impacts and I get their process, but I'm just really underwhelmed with this haul. I think this is a C grade to me. Again, very difficult draft to analyze, but my heart of hearts tell me this is a pretty underwhelming haul, and I think they could have walked out of here with some more upside, honestly, and maximized what they had a lot more than they did on really both days of the draft that they were picking on. But it could have been worse. You could have drafted like the 49ers, who, man, I hate this draft. I think this was the worst draft of the weekend, and I know they didn't have a first or a second round pick, so it's not easy. But, dude, you trade up for Jair Brown, who was a mid to late day 3 player for me. I know he's a playmaker and has some exciting tape. Like, he's a highlight reel guy, right? You watch him, he's like, wow, those were some really impressive plays that he made. You watch his down-to-down coverage especially, and it's like, wow, he just doesn't have the size or athleticism to really project as a good cover safety in the league. If they didn't already have Talanoa Hufanga, I would like this pick a little bit more because I think Jair Brown really is going to have to play around the box as this kind of super instinctive, risk-taking, strong safety type, like Talanoa Hufanga. And I don't think he's going to be an upgrade to that player. Like, if you are going to take a safety here, give me Chris Smith, give me Jordan Battle, who I think was still available, Daniel Scott, even guys like, J.L. Skinner, Jason Taylor, even. Like, I really didn't like this pick. Now, I see what they like in him. He has a lot of similarities to Hufanga, but, like, dude, you don't need 2 Talanoa Hufangas. You already hit on that player. They had other needs they could have addressed, offensive line, especially, other players in the secondary. Like, there were really good cornerbacks available at this point in time. Gamble on Keely Ringo, right? Like, man, I really didn't like that pick. The kicker pick, 12 picks after that. I get that he was a really good college kicker for the last 2 years, but don't draft a kicker in the 3rd round. How many times have we sat here and said, this guy's different, and then he gets to the NFL and he's just like all of the other kickers that were drafted or picked up in priority free agents. It's just, it is probably the most random position as far as success rate projecting to the next level to think you're different and you've got this nailed down and you took, the best kicker in this draft and you had to take him in the 3rd round when there was really good players available. Dumb. Dude, think of if the Niners took Darnell Washington here to put as a part of this offense. How much more exciting is that, right? Like, dude, they had options that they could have gone with here, and they, to me, took nothing. Like, really nothing. And Cam Latu as well. Dude, he was a 6th-round player at best. Like, I know I put a day 3 grade on him because tight ends sometimes go a little bit earlier, and we saw that in this draft. And honestly, the main reason this isn't an F is because there was this big run on tight ends. But, dude, I thought Braden Willis, who went at the end of the 7th round, is a better player. At least Braden Willis is a good blocker. Cam Latu is a total, like, below average across the board. Alabama fans saw this, and they were like, are you serious? 3 Ds across the board, and you pair those 3 together, and that's like an F, man. I don't think they got anybody. I mean, the kicker might be a good kicker, but unless Hufanga gets hurt, I don't think Jair Brown's going to be a good starter for them. As having asked to play like slot corner or free safety, like, no, I don't think that's the role he can hold up at the next level. Super underwhelming haul between those 3 players. I think they did better on day 3. Darrell Luter was a good pick in the 5th round. I think he could be their starting slot corner or even start on the outside. Like, I think he was a very sound prospect, really good tape, pretty good athleticism. Like, I think he was their best pick that they made. So I'm not going to say it saved their draft, but you could maybe flip him. I mean, even that'd be a reach, but I'd much rather have Darrell Luter than any of the 3 picks they made at the end of the 3rd round. Robert Beal makes sense. He's really fast. He can be gamed up on stunts here for them. I don't think he's ever going to be a starter, but as someone that can come in on early downs, maybe they want to drop some of these guys into coverage and get a little bit more creative with their blitz packages. I think he can do that. But it was fine. I had a 6th round of priority grade on him. They take him at the end of the 5th. Then D. Winters, I said Darrell Luter was the best pick they made. I think that was going to be the most impactful pick they made. But you want to talk about fit and value? D. Winters at the end of the 6th round was one of the better picks in the 6th round, right? Like, he is a freak athlete. I've said this, but his tape against Michigan that individual game was the best game a linebacker had in this draft from the 2022 season. The rest of his season didn't go that way, right? He is a developmental player, really needs to learn his run keys, learn what he's doing in coverage a lot more, but an athlete who can cover kicks at really the highest level. He loves to run and hit, and that's a great special team. This guy ran a 4.49 40. He's almost an identical size to Dre Greenlaw. They just locked up Dre Greenlaw for a decent extension, but 3 years from now, if they want to get cheaper at this position and they really like the development that they've seen from D winners, a position that they've been probably the best in the league at developing these guys, I think that there's a really high relative to a 6th round pick. I think there's a high likelihood that he can be a cheaper replacement down the road and maybe even a better player than Dre Greenlaw because he's so explosive. Now that's way down the road, and I'm not trying to slight Dre Greenlaw as a really good player. But he's going to be coming up on a new contract in a few years, like 3 years down the road. So I just love the process there at the end of the 6th round. They take Braden Willis, who, like I said, I think was a better player than Cam Latu. I had him as my tight end. Let's see. I had Willis as tight end 14 and Cam Latu is tight end 15. I think inside this offense where you have George Kittle, at least Willis is a good move blocker and really buys into that side of the position. So like I said, I think he's a better player than Latu. I think in the 7th round, at the end of the 7th round, that's a pretty good pick. They take Ronnie Bell. A lot of people said this was a steal. I disagree. Ronnie Bell was my wide receiver 39 in this draft, a 6 to priority free agent grade. It's where he goes. He has theoretical athleticism, and maybe if he can continue to get healthy off the back heels of that really bad injury he suffered in 2021, you might be getting a steal. But that's a pretty big projection, right? We get to see him in person at the Senior Bowl. Not the best routes, really inconsistent hands, not a great contested catch guy. I think he is a plus athlete, but he's not some insane athlete. I see how he fits in this system. He's good on crossing routes. He's got, again, pretty good speed. So he could surprise, but I definitely don't think this was a steal. I think it was a fine pick. And then Jalen Graham, another developmental fast linebacker out of Purdue. Played a lot of safety at Purdue, but that's a fine conversion into this system. So between Winters and Graham, I think they'll end up with that kind of next, maybe not necessarily Dre Greenlaw, but even like Azeez Al-Shaair is another example of a guy that's turned into a pretty good linebacker for him. So I'm fine with those picks for sure. But dude, they had opportunities to get players in this draft, and I think they shit the bed. I really do. Like, you could have come out of that 3rd round with freaking Darnell Washington, Keely Ringo, and Adetomiwa Adebawore. Like, dude, what are you doing with these picks? I hate this draft. I really want to give it an F. I really do. I think some good process in the middle to late day 3 saves it for being a true F, and maybe this kicker can be the rare rookie kicker that doesn't get cut in a couple of years. But we just saw, like, last year, we were sitting here on this channel shredding them for a 3rd round pick in Ty Davis Price. Definitely an example of draft grades having a purpose. It's pretty frustrating, man. I mean, Kyle Shanahan makes up for this because he's such an incredible coach. But can you imagine if they didn't have these types of drafts? Like, if they were legit filling this roster up, like they run into all these injuries late in the year and they run out of depth and then they wonder what the hell is going on. Like, man, like I know they found Brock Purdy in the 7th round last year. Like, good for you. But I'm going to give it a D. This is the worst draft of the weekend, and I don't really think it's particularly close either. But we get to get a little bit more positive with the Seattle Seahawks, and I really like this draft. I have a few more criticisms of this draft than I think the consensus. I think consensus is this was like one of the 3 or 4 best drafts out there, and it certainly was really good. But there was a couple things that I definitely would have gone in a different direction, and I think they might have some regrets here, but it might not matter because of how good these first 2 picks were, right? You get Devon Witherspoon at 5. To me, was one of 3 blue chip players in this draft class with Bijan Robinson, Devon Witherspoon, and Will Anderson. So you get one of those 3 at 5. I love it. I love when teams kind of go outside of their conventional strategy for certain outliers. Like, you don't want to break your mold too often. But when you see someone that is just such a great fit for you and you go out of it to get that guy, I think that can really, it can be risky, but when they do it with the right players, and I think they did with Devon Witherspoon, I really think it's a commendable approach because some teams are just so stubborn about this stuff. And Seattle has been very stubborn about not drafting cornerback early because they've been able to churn these guys out. Even recently last year with Tariq Woolen as a day 3 pick. But, dude, Devon Witherspoon, I can't sing the praises of how well he fits with this defense any better. To me, it's like he can see the future at cornerback. He's the most instinctive, high reaction time corner I think I've ever watched. He pairs that with remarkable physical quickness and reaction time. One of the stickiest corners I've ever watched. If you want to talk about route squeeze and just staying at a guy's hip pocket, snapping downhill from quarters, like he can do it all, man. I love this fit. I think he gives you someone that can go bump and run, press man coverage against the better route runners in the league. Like I'm not trying to slight Tariq Woolen, but where he was best last year was running north and south, making plays from zone. I really still don't think Tariq Woolen is going to be this elite man-to-man follow guys around the field type of corner. Like there's no lockdown corners in the NFL. But now when you're struggling with Brandon Ayuk or Devontae Adams or Justin Jefferson, whoever it might be, those real elite separators at the next level, and Brandon Ayuk did give them fits last year, you have a guy that you can say, hey, can you stop that guy from getting open over the middle of the field every play, Devon? Thank you. Appreciate it. Like, it gives you an in-game, easy reaction. He can play inside and out. You love his physical toughness to play the run. I love this pick for the Seahawks. And then they take Jackson Smith-Njigba at 20. And, it's just so funny how some of these things work out. I was tweeting about how Jackson Smith-Njigba is not the next Justin Jefferson. And he was the kind of consensus wide receiver 1 in this draft. He wasn't for me, but that gap was super tight. It was just kind of a, flavor of the month, like pick your poison with him, Zay Flowers, and Quentin. I think people were, like, in my opinion, and I could be completely wrong, I think people were searching for a superstar wide receiver in this class that maybe doesn't exist, trying to make comparisons to Justin Jefferson, who, played mostly in the slot his final year. Justin Jefferson had 4.42 speed. He had good tape playing on the outside in his sophomore year. I hate that comparison. I don't see that type of player in Jackson Smith-Njigba. I see Amon-Ra St. Brown. Seriously, like I think it's an extremely close comparison. And you will take that player at 20 every day of the week. Some people are saying this was the steal of the draft. To me, this is always where Jackson Smith-Njigba probably should have gone. I think he's a slot-only player. He's going to be a really good, annoying slot wide receiver to cover. Do I think we're going to look back on this and say, like we said about the Vikings getting Justin Jefferson, like, how the hell did Justin Jefferson fall to 23? Do I think we're going to say that about Jackson Smith-Njigba? Honestly, I don't. I think this was great value. This was where they were supposed to get him. I don't think this was some unbelievable steal. But enough about that. Like, he is a great fit for the Seattle Seahawks, whatever you want to talk about. Like, you now put him in a spot where he can be exactly what he was at Ohio State. What was one of my sort of knocks on him was that in the 1 year that he did play at Ohio State, he was surrounded by Chris Olave and Offensive Rookie of the Year Garrett Wilson, 2 first-round picks who are running vertical, occupying safeties, demanding attention, and Jackson Smith-Njigba was just free to operate in the middle of the field. He's going to get to do that again in Seattle. Like, he can just do exactly what he's good at. He's going to be a really productive player because he's going to be an easy read for Geno. They're going to know he's going to be open all the damn time. And man, really great fit. If that's all they did, you're pretty damn impressed with this draft, right? But then you get to the second round, and this is kind of tough for me to grade this out because, like, I think Derek Hall is a great value where they got him. And I think Zach Charbonnet was, like, pretty good value at a second to a third round grade on him. But man, they had some, and I think if I was a Seattle Seahawks fan, this would be my sentiment. I don't mind these picks. They're going to be impactful players. I'm not really shredding them for this at all, but God, it would have been so much better if they took one of these picks and took one of these interior offensive linemen that were falling. Osiris Torrance, John Michael Schmitz, Alex Avila, even Matthew Bergeron moving into guard, even a Joe Tippmann. Like, man, I would have been even more ecstatic about this draft if they took one of these 2 picks and made him that guy, probably the Zach Charbonnet pick. Again, we'll talk about how he fits, and I like the fit. I'm not trying to shred them for it, but you probably could have waited there, taken a John Michael Schmitz or Osiris Torrance there, and gone with a Roshan Johnson with that 4th pick. If you want that bruising power back, or there were other guys too that could have played that role for you. So I didn't love that approach. It's not going to destroy their draft or anything, but I think it is a little bit regrettable, and I think a lot of Seahawks fans will share that sentiment with me, and I wanted to put that out there, but Derek Hall's a good fit. I like Derek Hall so much better at this point in the draft than I liked Boye Mafe last year. Boye for me was a 3rd to a 4th round guy last year. I do think they made a mistake on that one, and it is a reminder, like, sometimes these draft grades do play out. I was wrong about, they needed Kenneth Walker more than I thought they did, but I didn't think Kenneth Walker was a bad player. But anyway, that's all in the past. We'll revisit draft grades years from now. But I did not like the Boye Mafe pick last year. I had a 3rd to a 4th on him. Derek Hall, I think, is a much more impactful day one starter, really. I don't think he's ever going to be a dominant number 1 guy. But, man, I think he can come off the edge. I think he can start for you opposite of Nwosu. I think he can push the pocket and really help you now. So from a value perspective, I think that's fine. But taking Charbonnet, this is where I think I would be a little bit more critical. You do have Kenneth Walker. I think, Charbonnet's a really good player. I compare him to Damian Harris. But again, like, Damian Harris could have been had in free agency for $1.5 million, right? Like, once you're not talking about the Bijans of the world and even like the crazy explosive like Jahmyr Gibbs, for what it's worth, like guys like Charbonnet, you can find them around the league. Now, I think he's going to be a good player. But again, dude, I think you could have taken this pick and put it towards a John Michael Schmitz or Osiris Torrance. That would have been insane what they did. He's going to be the Thunder to Kenneth Walker's Lightning. I like that. It's so familiar to what Green Bay has had with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. Although I think Charbonnet is a better prospect than Dillon was coming out. Just a little bit more juice through the hole. So I don't think you're going to look back on this and be like, you really want those picks back. But I think if you want to talk about the most impactful way to help this team right now, it would have been either Torrance or John Michael Schmitz. And it's just my opinion. But they still got good players there, so I'm not slamming them for it. You get to the 4th round. I didn't love these picks. I honestly, like, straight up didn't like them. Anthony Bradford, this to me is just a reminder that, oh shit, we probably should have taken Osiris Torrance in the 2nd, because Torrance is just a substantially better version of Anthony Bradford. Some teams don't love these mauling bruisers, but they've had success with these guys. If you're going to take it, if you're going to value a guy of this size with the clunky feet and the poor pass protection, dude, Osiris Torrance was like the best case scenario for you to get him in the 2nd round. So again, it just comes back to that. Bradford, to me, he can create drive off the line of scrimmage. He's still young. I think you're in trouble if he's starting year 1. I don't think he's going to be. But not only was this a reach, but I do look at my board here and think there were better developmental options. Chandler Zavala, City So, and Antonio Mafia, the 2 guys the Patriots got. I just think they all have a better projection to the next level, and I did think this was a pretty major reach. I'd be pretty surprised if they get anything from him. So I really hope I'm wrong. I hope he balls out, starts for them year 1. But I just, that was my evaluation, and I'm going to be honest about it. Cameron Young as well, I thought this was a reach. What's really notable is, like, there was a big run of interior defensive linemen. I kind of get why they felt like they needed to grab him, but the run stopped after Cam Young. There was one more interior defensive lineman picked in the middle of the 5th round, and that was Jacqueline Roy to the Vikings, who I thought was a much better player than Cameron Young. And then you got to get to the middle of the 6th round until there was another interior defensive lineman picked. So to me, this was a reach. I thought there were better players available really at any position. I see an athlete, I see a developmental guy who has really good flashes of a bull rush, but I will be surprised if they get anything from him. I honestly, I like the Mike Morris pick better for what they're looking for. Mike Morris is going to put on some weight and play interior for them, which makes sense. He had good tape on the edge at Michigan, but he ran like a 4.95. Like, he just doesn't have the speed to run to the sidelines, to get to the quarterback in time. I think as an interior player, even if he's running, 5'1" at 295 pounds, I think he played the run really well. He's got good length. He's got good strength. So I'm very curious to see as a developmental gain weight type of pick what he can do. Olu Oluwatimi, some people viewed this as a steal. I did not. I see a backup in his game, a smart player, a rocked up pass protector, but kind of hurts himself by not creating a lot of drive off the line of scrimmage. He's just not a good athlete. So that shows up in his get off when he's trying to move people up front. It shows up if you're trying to block wide zone. He just can't, he's not the best reach blocker in the world. And it shows up in his foot speed and pass protection. As a center, teams would run loops and games on him, and he just couldn't get over to pick up stunts. So I think he's a really physically limited player. He's really strong. I think he can be a backup, but I definitely didn't see some steal there. Jarek Reed, I didn't get to his tape, but looking at his profile, a 5'9", uber athletic safety. I mean, man, I can't think of a better spot for him to go than to sit and learn from Quandre Diggs for a couple years. Diggs is getting up there in age, and I wouldn't be surprised. This just made a lot of sense as a fit for a player like this with this type of physical profile. So I think he's a guy to keep an eye on for sure down the road while he plays special teams. And then I love the Kenny McIntosh pick late. They let Travis Homer go in free agency. He was their scat back. And McIntosh is just a better version of that player. Not the fastest guy, but a remarkable receiving back. Like, this guy had, I think, 70 receptions in his career at college, in college, and he didn't have a single drop. He runs good routes. You're concerned about the 4.6, 4.40, which I think he ran, limiting his upside. But I see a very similar player like to James White for the New England Patriots. And to get him at the end of the 7th round, I think as a third running back now, like, he makes so much sense. That's one of the most complete running back rooms for what it's worth. Charbonnet as the bruiser, really good in short yardage situations. Kenny McIntosh, who can come in on third downs if Kenneth Walker is tired, and then Kenneth Walker is your juiced up starter. So I really like this draft. It gets a B+ from me. Not getting an interior lineman in the 2nd round, I think, is a bit regrettable. And then I did think there was some pretty major reaches there in the 4th round. So I'm going to ding them a little bit for that, but it's probably not going to matter, right? Like, you got those 2 players in the 1st round, incredibly high floor players at valuable positions. Hard to be too critical of this draft for Seattle. So that's going to do it for the NFC West. Definitely some fascinating drafts here. Some amazing ones, some horrible ones. Like, you may have had the best draft in this division and the worst draft in this division. I think the Cardinals maybe made up some ground on this group a little bit in this draft. So time will tell, as with all these draft grades, but I hope you guys are enjoying the analysis. We're going to have one more of these a little bit later tonight. We're going to get to the AFC South, and then we'll wrap things up tomorrow with the NFC South. Thank you, NFC South fans, for your patience on this one. But we're out of here. Please do hit that like button. Drop your comments down below, and we'll see you soon. Peace out.